You are listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. Sustainable World Radio brings you in-depth interviews, news, and commentary about positive solutions to environmental challenges. Solutions that adhere to the permaculture ethics of earth care, people care, fair share. Are you interested in learning more about permaculture projects around the globe? How to plant a food forest? Restorative design or ethnobotany? Then stay tuned for Sustainable World Radio. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier. Welcome to Sustainable World Radio, Irina Stoenescu, a food researcher on healthy food innovations. And Irina, I'm so happy to have you here. We have so much to talk about, and I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So welcome to Sustainable World.
Thank you, Jill. I'm very excited. I am very honored by your invitation, and I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation.
Your work just sounds fascinating to me. It seems like you really like to educate about food, educating through food. Food is a vehicle for education. Can you tell our listeners just a bit about your work, how you got involved with plants and food and promoting sustainable food systems?
I actually have an academic background in political science and international studies, and it may seem a departure from what I studied in university. It really isn't, because food has so many ties into the economic system, into the political system, into the way we trade different goods. And over all of those, food, I think, is an excellent vehicle to learn about different cultures, to learn about different traditions, and to understand each other better. It's one of the least controversial vehicles that we have to learn about other cultures. As far as my work is concerned, I do botanical research, economic analysis, market research, and I try to work with individuals and companies interested in developing healthy products, balancing profit with an ethical standpoint.
You are also one of the national coordinators for the National Heirloom Expo in Santa Rosa, California. I wanted our listeners to know about this amazing expo, and I was lucky enough to go last year and highly recommend it. And the National Heirloom Expo has been called the World's Fair of Pure Food. So let's just dive right into this topic. When you talk about pure food, what does that mean to you and in terms of the Heirloom Expo as well?
Sure. First of all, I would like to tell you that I'm extremely proud to be a coordinator for this event, because I believe that they truly advance healthy and good food. It's an educational event. I feel very privileged because I get to talk to a great variety of people and listen to their opinions and listen to them making a cohesive argument in favor of sustainable food systems. To respond to your question about pure foods, there's no dictionary definition of it, but there are a few characteristics that I think are worth mentioning. Real food, pure food, has taste, it has nutrition. We consider that it is not genetically modified. That's what we characterize as being pure food. And it is food that comes with a story, that comes with a certain identity.
A large portion of the Heirloom Expo, when I was there last year, was about heirloom plants. And I think of heirloom plants as plants with a story. Can you tell us, in case listeners are thinking, well, what is an heirloom plant? Can you tell us what that term means?
Well, it's a traditional variety. And when I talk about the story, I talk about the relation between man and nature. An heirloom variety is selected by an individual or community, and it has a story that goes through generations. That's what we're trying to capture with this notion.
And so when we're talking about heirloom plants, it's really a way to connect to your ancestors almost, or people who have come before who cared enough to save these seeds and make sure this plant continues on.
Yes, absolutely.
And so tell us why you advocate for these plants and seeds, heirloom seeds, versus genetically modified seeds.
All right. So I will take the first three components that I mentioned as characteristic of pure foods: taste, nutrition, and not genetically modified. So all those to me are intrinsic values of a good diet, of good health. And I think that we live through a paradoxical crisis. We have malnutrition and obesity coexisting. Hence, I believe that a balanced diet that provides us with a diversified set of nutrients is essential. The second very important element is the identity of those foods, the story behind foods. Many people talk today about the standardization of our lifestyles, standardization of our diets, the negative effects of globalization, etc., etc., etc. As that applies to food, we see that we've forgotten a lot of our traditional vegetables, traditional fruits. We don't cook home anymore, and we tend to blame this on modernity. I tend to believe that we need to rediscover our identity through food, that we need to share our knowledge, that we need to share our traditions, and that has to be a deliberate effort. Rather than complaining, it's really simple when you go to a fast food chain and you order your burger. It takes you 5 minutes to do the ordering, the eating, and the complaining.
The complaining can go on for a little bit longer.
Okay, granted, it can go on for a bit longer. But to cook with your traditional varieties, it takes a lot more time and a lot more effort, because you have to read on what you do with the plant, with the food once you've acquired it. You have to identify the farmer you can buy it from. You have to identify the chef that's experiencing with it to maybe integrate it into a modern or a fusion dish. So it takes a lot more effort. But in many ways, it's a learning process that allows us to understand our history, to affirm who we are, to learn about others, to appreciate each other. I really think that we have this thirst for identity. You see, a couple of years back, I had a very positive experience when I went to Japan. I was in Kyoto going through one of their markets, and I observed that most farmers, or most vendors, I should say, had on the product label a picture of the farmer that produced that vegetable or that fruit, and a little bit of the story of the family farm, of how that came to be, where it was located, and so on. And I remember being in awe. There was nothing like that that I was seeing in any of the stores near me. Now I go and shop at a local store here in Ohio, and I notice that they're doing something very similar. They are now writing the name of the farmer and the location of where that product is coming from. And I believe that's fantastic. That's a good indication that people are starting to pay attention where their food comes from, how they can do something with it. It's more than just something you put in your stomach. So I really believe that this identity of food is important for our mind, is important for our spirit.
I love that. And food has a story, and we're starting to want to know that story.
Yes, we are. We are. And we start observing that it is important to relate us to who produces and how our food gets produced.
And that gives us that connection to land.
Absolutely. It refamiliarizes us with nature. If you think about the traditional setting of the marketplace, it used to be a direct interaction between you, the buyer, and the producer of your food. In our modern system, unless you go to a farmer's market, you have that connection almost lost. And I think it's important that we recreate it. So reconnecting with our food is something that we absolutely have to do.
Reconnecting with our food benefits us in many ways. You've already mentioned some of the benefits, but maybe also our health as well.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I believe that a healthy diet is a diversified one. We need a lot of nutrients, and we can't take them from only a handful of plants. I was looking at the FAO document, Food and Agriculture Organization. And according to them, 90% of our caloric intake comes from 15 plants. That's absolutely astounding to me, that we can consume so little when we have at our disposition such a wealth of food plants that we have completely forgotten. So in trying to address our healthy lifestyle, we need to understand the diversity of foods that we should and could consume.
And 15 plant sources of food is just mind-boggling. But in many places in the US, and I'm sure worldwide, there is not access to pure foods, is what we're talking about.
You are probably right. I think that we are seeing increased access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been more of a monocrop of fast food and convenience store food in many inner cities and places like that.
Oh, of course. And even fresh food. You're probably familiar with what Michelle Obama defined as the food desert.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You can't even find enough fresh food. You're almost condemned to go and get something that's pre-cooked. So I do agree with you, and I think that's changing. I think the number of farmer markets is exponentially increasing. I think that people are starting to become more aware of what kind of choices they can make and what kind of foods they want and don't want to consume. I'm sure you are familiar, for example, with the labeling controversy for the GMOs. To touch a little bit on that topic, I was reading a New York Times poll according to which 93% of the respondents wanted GMOs labeled. That's not happening yet, but I certainly believe that there's a lot of public pressure in that direction. So people are very preoccupied now with what they're eating. Again, I think that for the United States, a big part of that has to do with the obvious crisis, with the crisis of obesity.
Mm-hmm. Really, if you think about, you were talking in Japan and more increasingly here, the picture of the farmer on the cover, on the packaging. With genetically modified food, what would it be? A picture of a test tube with a little hat on and glasses?
But you see, I don't think that's what people are looking for. And I find it very strange because when you're certain that what you're selling is good and healthy for your consumers, it should be inconsequential if it's labeled or not. So that poses some questions for me.
You mentioned how I think heirloom and the term we're using in this interview, pure food, that does help increase the biodiversity of our food supply.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When we talk about heirlooms, we talk about a diversified cropping system automatically. And also, I think it's myopic to think of only species. Okay, a tomato, but a tomato has so many varieties. No tomato is identical to another one. It has different nutrients. It has different taste, different behavior. And I don't see why we would deprive ourselves of that voluntarily. By improving only one variety, we are giving away, we are renouncing our right to enjoy the many other varieties that bring us a different set of nutrients, leaving aside the gustatorial pleasures.
So these heirloom crops, they taste better. And I believe that modern crops have really been bred more for the convenience of shipping. Is that true?
No, absolutely. In fact, I had a conversation a while ago with a gentleman that is a very large producer of tomatoes. And he was saying that they have to be able to withstand traffic for at least 7 days. If that is the condition, and it's not easy to find that in heirloom varieties, yes, I can understand it from an economic standpoint. But I think that the question that we need to ask ourselves is how much we are willing to sacrifice for the sake of having industrially produced 14-day shelf life tomatoes, at least. Is that something that we really want? And why is it necessary is the other question. Why is it necessary to bring our tomatoes to Ohio from California when in summertime we can produce them here? Another discussion that we could enter into is seasonality. We've become very used to have all foods at all times. I don't know that that is sustainable, and I don't know if it even allows us to fully enjoy them when we do have them. It becomes mundane. It's not more the season of the strawberry or the season of the apricot. Every day is the season of the strawberry.
And they usually don't taste that good if they've been shipped for long distances.
No, of course not. Most really tasty strawberries, and I remember when I was a child growing up in Romania, we would buy strawberries from the market and you had to eat them the same day, because if you would keep them even refrigerated for 2 or 3 days, they would lose their consistency and not taste good anymore. But those that we did buy and ate the same day were extraordinary. They had a perfume that's incomparably better with anything that I've seen commercialized here in big stores.
We're talking about heirlooms that have a positive effect. Heirloom seed varieties, heirloom plants have a positive effect on plant and crop biodiversity. How do GMOs affect our food supply and food security and biodiversity?
All right. Well, first of all, I would like to tell you an opinion of mine. I don't believe that we can talk about food security without biodiversity. I don't think the two concepts can be divorced from each other. What does GMO presuppose? That we would have an improved variety and that we would overwhelmingly cultivate that one because it's been improved to be more resistant, to be more productive, and so on. So from the very beginning, that compromises biodiversity. So in my opinion, it compromises food security. I believe it also encourages monoculture. And it's not hard to think of great disadvantages of monocultures. It's enough to think of the Irish potato famine. I don't think that we can put absolute trust in one variety, no matter how improved it is. It's like saying, okay, we're going to build a Titanic of food plants, and it's never going to sink. It's myopic. It's not really good. It's not good environmentally. It's depleting soils of certain substances to do monocultures of one thing. I believe lots of people are having many concerns about health aspects related to GMOs. A recent article in the Huffington Post was saying that 64 countries in the world now have labeling regulations. That, to me, raises the question of why. If we believe that they are absolutely safe and good, then why do we have them regulated?
You mentioned the Titanic, and that is such a great point because we're really at a disadvantage. Not only is our food supply at risk for crop failure, also think of the pollinators and the other animals that coexist with the other crops. If we're just growing one type of crop, that really has an effect on the ecosystem as a whole.
Right. Well, I think GMOs are also an issue because of cross-pollination. There are now many places in the US where you can't raise heirloom varieties of corn, for instance, because of the risk of contamination with GMO corn. And I think that is simply not acceptable. If I would like to not consume GMOs, but I am forced by the cross-pollination phenomenon, then I don't think that we even benefit from an equality of choice in terms of our food selection.
And we can lose the non-GMO varieties from this, correct? I think I read in the Baker Creek seed catalog that some of the corn that they were selling, they had to stop selling the seeds because they could not find a source that wasn't contaminated.
I think it's true, and I think that Baker Creek is really dedicated to selling products that are not contaminated, and in fact they're going through a great effort of producing corn seed in places that do not have that risk of contamination. I know that they were looking at Hawaii.
And also the economic downside of losing these crops. A farmer has an organic field of corn and then the cross-pollination, that's a huge loss.
Of course it is. It's a loss of varieties and it's a loss of knowledge as well. Because it's not enough to have a seed stored in a seed bank. Many people have spoken about seed banks and seed collections as being an alternative to these losses in variety, but it's not the same as having them in the field. People lose their ability to work with them. We don't know anymore what they're susceptible to because we stop experiencing with them. We don't know how to apply biological controls because we raise only a few varieties. So there are many issues that are involved. It's not simply storing the seed and maintaining it there. It's not an item that has to be only collected. It's an item that has to be used. And in order for us to understand how we can best use it, we have to continue experiencing with it.
And that brings us into what people can do themselves to contribute to a more biodiverse and safe food supply. And do you have any thoughts on what the listener can do to participate in this?
Well, I think that we have different choices depending on the places we live in. There's definitely a difference in ability for somebody that has a large plot of land and lives in a rural area as opposed to somebody that lives in Manhattan, New York. I believe that planting heirloom varieties is our direct way of contributing to biodiversity. Now, on the part of the consumer, the food choices that we make when we enter into a store are extremely important. We see a lot of increase in the market of organics. So people are starting to say, okay, I don't want so many pesticides applied on my food. I want it to be sustainably raised. So they're making that choice. With heirlooms, I think that we are also seeing an increase in interest, but I think that we need to do more in education, in teaching people how to use different heirlooms. What is special about them? What makes them taste better in one food than your standard tomato or your standard pepper? For example, if you look at beans, there are some beans that will become almost creamy. There are some that when you boil them will maintain their more solid, more crunchy consistency. People need to become refamiliarized with these things. They need to know how to use heirlooms. And it's very important to work with chefs. It's very important to work with educators. I think it is very important to teach kids about heirloom varieties, about planting, about gardening. I see a lot of schools now having school gardens. I think it's a wonderful tool at our disposition. I think it's wonderful to start this teaching process from an early age. Oh, I should probably tell you that the National Heirloom Expo is doing a very concerted effort to involve kids in the event. Last year, I think we had over 2,000 kids coming over for the fun and educational day. We try to facilitate the learning process for children because I believe that the next generation should be enabled to make informed choices.
I've worked with children in gardens. I did a garden at the juvenile hall years ago, and then I've worked with kids in gardens for quite a while. And there's something about when kids grow their own food, they just light up, and it's so empowering for them.
Well, I think they also appreciate it more when it's raised by them, when they understand what it means to plant the seed, to wait, to tend to it. It's an illumination, if you will, of what it means to be producing your own food. It gives appreciation for it. It's not just a product that you go and buy. It's not a consumable. It's something you become attached to.
So true. And with heirlooms as well, something, if people haven't grown them before, when you save the seed yourself, they will be true to type.
Yes. That is a very important characteristic. You will be getting your same seed every year and you're not obliged to keep buying it. You're not dependent on your vendor.
Which really is a stark contrast to the genetically modified seeds.
Yes, this argument is being brought into discussion oftentimes because hybrid seeds create a certain dependency, a complete dependency on the producer of that seed.
So we were talking about ways that people can participate in biodiversity. So really planting heirloom plants or seeds is one excellent way. Saving your seeds is another way. Do you have any other advice for people that want to really try to work toward a more secure food future?
All right. So first of all, in biodiversity, we have wild species, naturally occurring species, and then we have agro-biodiversity, which integrate man's labor to select a certain variety. When we talk about heirloom varieties, we talk about agro-biodiversity. So it's something that we contribute to creating and to maintaining. I think it is very, very important for people to save their own seed by keeping your own varieties, giving them a food use for yourself as well as an economic use by commercializing them. You're also making sure that those seeds live on. What we see many times when we talk about biodiversity is that people say they would like to protect it, but they don't really know how to do so. They don't have any tangible aspect. Generally, it's the conservation strategy. Okay, I will not touch that, but it's not sufficient. And in particular, in the case of food plants, they have to be used. Their importance comes through use. We need to know how to use them. They're not things that are meant to just be looked at. They have a utility. And through that utility, by understanding that utility and taking advantage of it, we are making sure that we are preserving that biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. And it gives us a role to play other than just destroying biodiversity. We're promoting it through our actions.
Absolutely. And I think that by having an economic value attached to some of these crops, it becomes easier for many people to become involved and, quote unquote, protect biodiversity.
So is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners about heirloom plants, heirloom seeds, and biodiversity?
First, I would like to invite you all to join us for the National Heirloom Expo. I have to tell you that last year we had over 4,000 varieties in all. So in addition to being a real show of color and shape, and I look at many people, you should see their surprise on their faces when they start noticing that an eggplant can be white, and it can be green, and it can be red, and it can be purple, and it can be striped, it can be white and rosy. It gives, first of all, it gives that understanding of what biodiversity really means. It's not just about eggplants and tomatoes and squash. Within an eggplant, you have incredible variety. So there's a different appreciation. I would like to invite you all to join us for that event. That's one aspect of it. The other thing that I would like to suggest is that you start thinking about what food security really means. The way it is defined right now, it's reliable access to safe and nutritious food that meets your dietary needs and your preferences. So I would like you to think of what this means in terms of reliability of access. How reliable is it for you to be bringing your food from thousands of miles away? Is that really reliable? Is that really secure? The other thing is how nutritious your food is. If we are selecting for shelf life, are you really getting your nutrients from the food you're eating? And can you compensate that through other means? Is it indicated to start looking at artificial solutions when you have that much diversity at your disposition? Yes, so I guess that would be my challenge for people. When they think of food security, to try to exit the standard definition and see how it really applies to their life, how it applies to their particular circumstances. To renounce just the rhetoric and start looking at the practicalities.
Which will have such a multiple benefits on all aspects of their life.
Oh, of course, of course.
And that brings us back to the Heirloom Expo, which is a wonderful educational experience. It's a 3 days, I believe. And I think, is it September 9th through the 11th this year?
Yes, this year it will be September 9th through the 11th. So you have 3 days to enjoy the pure food that's going to be brought there. And one thing I wanted to mention, and I think that I forgot to do so earlier, is that we don't only have heirloom plants, but we have heritage breeds of different animals and poultry. So you can also take a look at the exhibits that people from all over the U.S. will bring, containing different rare breeds of animals.
If you love food, seeds, plants, heirloom vegetables, there's a giant pumpkin contest, I think the largest tomato contest, music. One of my favorite parts was the Festival of Fruit. I love that. That was so wonderful. And then that giant biodynamic exhibit that you had that showed all the different, I think it had aquaponics and it had all these different things in that one area outside. So it gives people a really great opportunity to check out these amazing heirloom plants and then get to see things in action. And then the speakers, how many speakers do you usually have there?
I believe we're going to have over 100 this year. Throughout the 3 days, we have 3 or 4 speaker halls. And we always have presentations on how to grow these heirloom varieties, how to integrate them into edible landscaping projects, what is the connection between the nutrition values of different varieties and our health. We have a lot of non-GMO activists that will come and give their observations and studies on these foods. So it's a very diverse crowd, a very diverse group of speakers, and we hope we can address in the 3 days a lot of issues that pertain to how we can make ourselves healthy and how we can make our environments healthy. Because by planting these heirloom varieties, we have impact not just on what we eat, but how our cities look like, how our rural areas look like, what kind of air we breathe, and so on. It goes way beyond it being just about good food. It has implications in many other areas.
It's not just about gardening.
No, it's not. And actually, we will have some flowers there. So for those interested in pure aesthetics, there's that element. We have people that will bring bees. Bees are definitely a very important element of reproducing all these varieties. We need pollinators. So you'll be able to learn about that. You mentioned the squash contest, which is very popular.
And the mountain of squash, or was it mountains of squash? That was unbelievable. I've never seen so many colors of plants in one area. It was huge. How high was that thing?
I think it was over 2 meters high. Mexico really does an incredible job with the pumpkin pile. And I don't know if you know, but that exhibit was in front of the White House as well.
Oh, I didn't know. I just remember walking in there. I think we went there first, and I thought, this is the place for me. It was like being a kid in a candy shop.
It definitely is. Definitely is.
But candy that's good for you.
It's very, very, very exciting. And also you can acquire many of the seeds during these events. There are some seed exchanges opportunities where you can bring your own seed and trade it for other varieties. There can be vendors of seed. Definitely you'll find there are some companies that you are really familiar with. Baker Creek is there, and they have an incredible selection of heirlooms. And you can always ask them what would be appropriate for your area. They do a lot of advising during these events.
And one thing that we cannot forget is also the food. We never went. I don't think we went out to eat once. Outside of the conference, the expo, because the food there was the best food I've ever had at any conference.
It's extraordinary, and we try to address all tastes. So you will have some vegetarian selections, and then for meat lovers, there's also that option. All the food we try to encourage people to come and produce it there from scratch. It's organic food. It celebrates the same concept of diversity, heirloom, organically raised.
And for those who are thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be thousands of dollars, the prices last year were very reasonable, extremely reasonable for what you can get out of this expo.
Well, we try to keep it very affordable. As I said, our main goal is educational. So we try to provide access for everyone that wants to come. We try to enable them to be there. And the same holds true for our exhibitors. Being an exhibitor at the National Heirloom Expo is free of charge. So for all those people that bring collections, their collections of seeds or their different heirloom varieties, their produce, we make it free of charge. I think that even for vendors, we have very advantageous conditions, and we try to work with each of them so that we make sure they have a rate that makes sense within the size of their business. I really believe that this event is unique by the variety of plants, food plants that it brings, by the variety of people that we are able to attract. Last year we had over 18,000 people, and it was only our third annual event.
If people want to know more about this expo, sign up. I don't know if the tickets are available yet, but maybe vendors could get information. What is the website?
Our website is www.theheirloomexpo.com. You can always contact me as well. My email is irina@theheirloomexpo.com. And I'm happy to provide you with any information that may be pertinent to your business or respond to any questions you might have. Tickets are not available yet online, but they will be soon. However, if you would like to be an exhibitor or vendor, then I strongly encourage you to contact us, because we want to make sure that you have a positive experience and that our attendees have a positive experience, and we have to do all the organizational work in advance. I have already tried to send emails to most of the organic farms in California. Everybody's welcome to come. We have participants from all over the U.S., and we also encourage foreign participation. Right now I'm in discussions with a group of Bolivian farmers that raise different varieties of quinoa. So I hope to get them to the show and to increase the number of international participants as well.
If you're listening and you do not live in California or the U.S., be sure to contact Irina, because there could be a way for you to attend this event.
Oh, definitely. And we would be honored to have as many people, and even to suggest to us what they would like to bring. You saw last year we had collections of tomatoes, and we have collections of squash and beans. And this year, as I said, we will try our best to increase our grain selection, but people can bring anything. We are happy to look at less common heirloom varieties.
The Festival of Fruit was so fun. There were fruits there I'd never heard of. It was just great to see them.
Oh, yes. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at Steve Spangler's exotic fruit collection.
I don't know if I did. How could I have missed that?
Oh, he was right at the entrance. And one of the other things that we're very proud of is that many of our exhibitors really hold unofficial presentations with most of the attendees. If somebody comes and asks the question, they will get a full speech on how that variety was created and how they tended to it, when they got it, where they got it from, how it adapted to their climate. Most of our exhibitors are really open about sharing their information.
Mm-hmm. We had that experience with John Glavis, I believe his name is.
Oh, John is extraordinary.
Yeah, what a plant person. That was just fabulous. I actually have a short 10-minute episode of John from the expo on my other podcast, The Plant Report. And John talks all about Ashitaba, which is an amazing plant.
Yes, I actually had the opportunity to taste his tincture on a visit following the expo last year. And I must tell you that it's really good. I found it very appealing in taste.
So Irina, thank you so much for this time talking about food and heirloom seeds and the Heirloom Expo. And I wanted just to end with, what would be your hope and vision for a future filled with pure foods and food security? A little bit of what you would hope to see in the coming years.
I would like the definition of food security to take into consideration not just quantity of food that we have, but quality of food. I would like to see the heirloom varieties gaining more popularity. And by example, I hope that we can demonstrate to the skeptics that we can feed a hungry world with a more sustainable approach to agriculture that integrates traditional varieties and traditional knowledge, that is respectful of people's liberty to choose what they want to plant and what they want to ingest, what they want to put in their bodies. I think that it is very important for us to rediscover our connection with nature. That doesn't mean that we will all be farmers, because obviously not all of our circumstances allow us to do that, but to gain a better knowledge of where our food comes from, how it is produced, and connect to the people that feed us. That I think is essential for a healthier society, for food security, for preserving our biodiversity, and for preserving our identity, for not getting lost in the over-standardization, for not getting lost in the convenience of doing things without thought and much effort.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting you at the expo.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you to all your listeners, and I hope to see you all in September in Santa Rosa between the 9th and the 11th. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You've been listening to a Sustainable World Radio podcast. You can find us online at sustainableworldradio.com and also on iTunes. For more information about permaculture and ecology, visit the Sustainable World Media YouTube channel, where you'll find videos about permaculture, aquaponics, organic gardening, rainwater harvesting, and much, much more. Sustainable World Radio is a listener-supported program. If you like what we do, please consider making a donation to the show. I'm your host and producer, Jill Cloutier, and thank you so much for listening. Our first documentary, The Soil Solution, is now available at sustainableworldmedia.com. The Soil Solution is a 28-minute documentary film that explores the potential that healthy soil may hold in reversing climate change. I'm including an episode from my new podcast called The Plant Report. This episode was recorded at the 2013 National Heirloom Expo in Santa Rosa, California. And this is an interview with one of the vendors and speakers at the event, John Glavis of Tierra Biodiversity Research Gardens. Welcome to The Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world, one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to The Plant Report, because every plant has a story. Our plant today is Ashitaba, Latin name
Angelica Kiski Koizumi.
A member of the Apiaceae family, Ashitaba is also known as tomorrow's leaf because of its amazing regenerative properties. Supposedly, if you pick a leaf off a plant, there will be a new one the next day. Ashitaba grows to about 4 or 5 feet or 1.5 meters high. Ashitaba has ribbed stems, a long root, and greenish-white flowers that usually bloom the second year. To add Ashitaba to your diet, you can eat the leaves and stalks raw or cooked and use the roots for pickling. You can also dry the leaves and stalks for tea and grind them up and use them in juices, smoothies, and other foods for added nutritional value. If you'd like to grow your own Ashitaba, you can plant the seeds directly into a nice soil mix like I did, but unfortunately my germination rate was 0. So I did some research and learned that Ashitaba likes to be cold stratified. So if you live in a cool climate, go ahead and plant the seeds into a flat or pots and put them outside. If you don't live in a cool climate, you can mimic the cold by using your refrigerator or possibly cold cellar. What you would do is put the seed in a moist medium, something that would stay moist, not really wet, and then put it in the refrigerator or cold cellar for 30 days. Once the 30 days is over, then you can plant the seed. Many growers recommend soaking the seed in chlorine-free water before you plant them. So if your water is really chlorinated, you can let it sit out for 24 hours and then put the seed in, let it soak, and then plant it. I learned more about this remarkable plant when I visited the booth of John Glavis, a botanical researcher, organic gardener, and owner of Tierra Biodiversity Research Gardens. I met John at the Heirloom Expo in Sonoma, California, so you'll hear a bit of a crowd behind John, but I think that his message comes out loud and clear. Can you tell us the name and Latin name of this plant?
Yes, this is an Angelica Kiski. It's also known as Ashitaba, which is in Japanese, it means tomorrow's leaf. It's a very, very exciting plant in that the plant grows in the Ishu Islands of Japan, southern Japan. It has a history there that goes way back, but virtually unknown in the United States. We're now growing it for the first time in this country. We've successfully grown the seeds, and we're now making it available to people. This plant is probably one of the most amazing medicinals I've ever come across in my career. It has an earth growth factor, which helps with degenerative nerve disease. In Japan, they grow Ashitaba and use it for just about everything. You can find it in the juice bars called Ashita bars in the underground of the subway system in Tokyo. They also dry the leaf and powder it, make ice cream, make tea. They use the leaves for a tempura, any way they can get it into their bodies, basically. But the thing that I found growing it and using it myself is that it's changing my health tremendously. I'm 63 this year. I feel 35, and I'm watching my skin heal. I'm utilizing it too. And I really think it's one of the most important discoveries of my career as a botanist, because it has chalcone, which is an antioxidant, and this antioxidant, which is really not found in any other plants. There's small amounts in hops and a few other places, but this one has a yellow sap. When you cut the leaf, it just oozes this yellow, almost looks like latex paint, and you wonder whether you want to eat that or not. But you really do. It's a very bitter flavor, but the thing that it does is it heals the liver, it goes into your system, tries to figure out what's wrong, and tries to help you. And the thing that I feel about Ashitaba also is that I just read recently that it seems to be helping with radiation damage to cells, and certainly, interestingly, from Japan. The fact is, the herbs and the plants that we have, the sacred connection with plants, is really our best bet to move forward in the world that we're in, and that's what the heirloom exhibition here is really about. I work with Baker Seed, and I'm on a nonprofit board with them, and they're doing wonderful work in the world. So I think the thing that's most important right now is that the sense of heirloom connection, sacred medicine levels of growing our own medicine, growing our own food, trying to come into contact with direct relationship with the earth and each other. The nourishing traditions of our healing are not just what we put in our mouth, but sometimes is as much about what comes out of our mouths.
Can you tell me a bit about your company here and what the name of it is and where you're located?
Sure. I have a biodiversity research center called Tierra. I started this about 7 years ago, and the idea is to trial indigenous food plants and medicine plants from all over the world to see what grows in the maritime climate of West Marin County. We've discovered maybe 12, 14 plants now that we can use, and we're rebuilding a food system based on high nutrition plants, including quinoa, tree tomatoes, all these different Andean plants that I discovered when I was down in Ecuador doing research. I noticed that the high altitudes of the Andean plateau are very similar to the coastal maritime climate. And so I was wondering why you can't grow these plants where I am, and sure enough you can. So what we're doing now is we're incorporating all of these plants into the plants that we know about that are really good, like kales and things like this, and we're starting to use an indigenous model where we can get people behind people with small gardens in their backyard that'll pool all of the food together for the community, so that if anybody has a crop failure, they'll be covered. It's our insurance. And then also just to really believe that, I have my grandchildren hand threshing quinoa. We're committed to the indigenous lifestyle. So it's getting the oil and the money out of our food is our goal. And then also to make a direct and immediate relationship commitment to the community in how that food is grown.
And if someone wanted to contact you, how would they find you?
My email is heirloomhuman@gmail.com, so that's not too hard to remember. And we're really encouraging everyone out in the world to do their own research and begin their journey into a direct relationship with the earth, so that we can begin to really make I heard a great term the other day. Instead of shapeshifters, I like the idea of a shift shaper. So we are all shift shapers, and we're trying to create this shift we need to go through. And I feel very strongly that, it's a very dangerous time on the planet, but at the same time, it's bringing forth the necessity of our changes, the evolution that we need to go through.
And do you feel plants are really there to help support us in this transition?
Yes, indeed. I think nature in general has been waiting for us. It's missing us. We somehow got off on this very temporary road of isolating ourselves and separating ourselves from nature. And I think all of nature is now pointing out that we can't do that any longer. It's getting very critical. Things are extremely dangerous. None of us know what the future is, but we do know that if we can maintain, and heal ourselves and have that direct relationship with the earth, that's going to be our best way through this.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.